The moment I drove through the rusted gates of the old Hopper Ranch, a strange sense of triumph tinged with unease settled over me. The sprawling fields, cracked and brown from years of neglect, stretched endlessly under the late afternoon sun. Dust swirled in lazy spirals along the gravel drive as my truck's tires crunched over the stones. Most people would have seen nothing but decay. I saw potential, the raw skeleton of something I could rebuild, and something I could use to make them pay. Pay! That was the word that drove me here. For months, my plan had been meticulous. Buy the bankrupt ranch at a fraction of its worth, step into the shadows of the Hopper legacy, and let the past sins of those who had ruined me crumble under my carefully calculated revenge. Most people buy a property for the serenity it offers. I bought it as a weapon. The ranch had been silent for as long as I could remember. No livestock stirred in the fields, no creak of windmill whispered in the breeze, only the occasional crow's call from the skeletal trees lining the horizon. Even the house, though weathered and boarded, seemed to hold its breath. There was a beauty in the quiet, yes, but also a tension, as if the land itself was aware of the storm that was about to come. I stepped out of my truck, the sun warming my back, and let my eyes wander. The main house loomed ahead, its paint peeling like scabs, windows staring blankly like eyes that had seen too much. The barns, half collapsed, had names etched into their beams, faded reminders of families that had once dreamed and worked here. My gaze lingered on the horizon, where four dark shapes suddenly appeared, distant but unmistakable. Trucks, big ones, heavy-duty, rumbling down the main road that led to my gate. I froze, heart hammering. It couldn't be a coincidence. I had been careful, secretive. No one knew I was coming here until I had stepped onto the property. And yet, here they were, 4 trucks moving like predators, their engines growling in the stillness. My mind raced, cataloging every possibility, ranchers with grudges, old Harper allies, or worse, people who knew why I had really come. The trucks slowed as they reached the edge of my property, forming a perfect, intimidating semicircle around the gate. I squinted, trying to see the faces behind the tinted windows, but it was impossible. They didn't wave, they didn't honk, they just waited, like sentinels guarding something, or waiting for me to make the first move. Why were they here? It was a question that refused to leave my mind, gnawing at my nerves. Was it a warning? A threat? Or something far more personal, far more dangerous? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I had expected resistance. This was a Harper ranch, after all, but I hadn't expected it to start so quickly, so violently, right at the gate. I tried to rationalize. Perhaps it was some local gang of rustlers, hoping to scare away a new owner and claim the land for themselves. But no, these trucks weren't ordinary vehicles. They were polished, black, and heavy-duty, built to intimidate, not blend in. Whoever was behind them had planned this carefully, just as I had. And that meant one thing. They knew exactly who I was and why I was here. I took a step back, scanning perimeter. The ranch was isolated, hundreds of acres of open land with nothing but trees and fences for miles. Reinforcements were impossible. My phone had no signal. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but I didn't. Fleeing would admit weakness, and weakness was the one thing I could not afford. Not today. Not here. I walked to the gate, hand resting on the cold metal, feeling the texture of rust and grit beneath my fingers. I let my voice carry, even though I had no idea if anyone could hear me. Who's there? What do you want? My words echoed across the empty fields, swallowed by the wind. The trucks didn't move. No lights, no signals, just a steady hum of their engines. I felt a chill creep up my spine. For the first time since I had purchased the ranch, I questioned my decision. Had I miscalculated? Had I underestimated the ghosts that haunted this place? But then I reminded myself of why I had come. They had ruined me once, taken everything, left me to watch as my life was shredded. And now, they were here, thinking they could intimidate me before I even stepped inside. That thought fueled a dangerous fire inside me. I wasn't here to cower. I was here to reclaim, to dismantle, and to make them regret the day they had ever crossed me. I stepped closer to the gate, letting my presence be known. If they thought silence would frighten me, they were wrong. Silence had never scared me. It had been my ally, my companion during the long months of planning, waiting and scheming. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the cracked driveway. The trucks remained, immovable, silent watchers of the boundary I now protected. A question burned hotter in my mind than fear ever could. Were they here to test me, or had the real battle already begun? I touched the old, splintered wood of the gate and whispered to myself, "They'll see soon enough that I don't scare so easily." And yet, as I looked at those dark trucks, I couldn't shake the suspicion that this was more than just intimidation. This was a message, and I had to be ready, because when the first move was made, there would be no going back. The ranch was quiet, too quiet, but the quiet had broken the moment I arrived. And somewhere deep down, I knew this night would be the start of a reckoning, one that would leave no one unscathed. As the shadows lengthened and the truck sat silently like waiting predators, I asked myself the question I didn't dare speak aloud. Who had sent them, and how far were they willing to go to stop me? The sun had sunk behind the distant hills, leaving the ranch cloaked in the eerie half-light of dusk. Shadows stretched across the cracked driveway, and the once comforting quiet of the Harper Ranch had twisted into something oppressive. I could still hear the low hum of the 4 trucks at the gate, a steady, menacing reminder that I was not alone. I fumbled for the flashlight in my truck, clicking it on and off as I tried to focus my thoughts. Logic screamed at me to retreat, to call the authorities, to run while I still could. But something deeper, older, burned through my fear. The memory of betrayal, the long nights I had spent plotting, the promise of payback that had brought me here in the first place. I had bought this ruin not for what it was, but for what it could become, a battlefield, a stage for justice. And I wasn't about to be chased away before my plans even began. I took a slow, measured step forward toward the gate, flashlight cutting a narrow path through the gathering shadows. The trucks didn't move. Their engines hummed like a predator circling its prey, but there was no driver visible. My mind raced. Were they empty? A trap? Or had someone stepped out into the darkness, waiting for me to make the first mistake? I pressed my ear to the gate and strained to hear. The metal creaked slightly under my touch, a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. And then, faint but unmistakable, came the crunch of gravel, footsteps, deliberate, heavy, approaching from the road. I froze. My hand tightened on the flashlight. Whoever it was, they were confident, deliberate. They weren't going to run. They were here for confrontation. "Identify yourself," I called, trying to sound firmer than I felt. My voice echoed across the empty fields, and for a heartbeat there was silence. Then a deep, mocking laugh rolled across the gravel like a warning. "Welcome to Harper Ranch," a voice drawled from the shadows, low and dangerous. "We've been expecting you." My pulse spiked. That tone, familiar yet foreign, ignited memories I had tried to bury. Someone who knew me, someone who remembered why I had vanished for so long, someone who remembered why I wanted revenge. I moved closer to the gate, weighing my options. I could see vague shapes now, for figures emerging from behind the trucks. They didn't wear masks, but the darkness kept their faces hidden. Each step they took was careful, measured. Predators. "What do you want?" I demanded again, though the words felt hollow. The answer was obvious. They wanted me to back down, to leave the ranch and forget the past. They wanted to remind me that the Harper name still held power. But they underestimated me. They had no idea how long I had waited for this moment. "You don't belong here," another voice said, sharper this time. I caught the edge of recognition. My old enemy, the one who had orchestrated my downfall, had never forgotten. And now, he stood across from me, a phantom from the past, flanked by his enforcers. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. I belong wherever I want. And today, I belong here. "You?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he signaled to the others, who stepped forward, closing the circle around the gate. My heart thudded against my ribs, but I refused to show fear. Not now. Not ever. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Revenge had taught me patience, strategy, the importance of timing. I wasn't going to charge blindly into their trap, but I needed to test them, to see how far they were willing to go. "Tell me," I said, voice calm but laced with venom. "What's the price of my life? Or is this just about sending a message?" He chuckled again, the sound echoing across the fields. Both, maybe, but mostly it's about reminding you that you can't outrun the past. The wind picked up, rattling the empty barns and making the shadows dance like phantoms. I scanned the property, anywhere I could retreat, hide, or gain leverage. But the terrain offered no advantage. Every inch of this land, once familiar to me through old maps and stories, now felt alien, hostile, and dangerous. Then I noticed it, a flicker of movement from one of the trucks. Not random. Deliberate. A shadow passed across a window, and my stomach sank. They had weapons. Guns. Of course they did. This was no mere intimidation. This was a setup for blood. I clenched my fists, forcing my fear into focus. My mind raced, calculating options, escape routes, and countermeasures. I had come prepared, not with a gun, but with something far deadlier: patience, strategy, and the knowledge that they had underestimated me. You think you can stop me? I asked aloud, my voice steady despite the rising tension. You think you can intimidate me before I even step inside my own property? Silence answered. Then one of them, the tallest, stepped forward, revealing himself fully in the dim light. His face was familiar, another piece of the past I had hoped to bury. "We're not here to scare you," he said. "We're here to make sure you regret this." I smiled coldly, a flicker of excitement mingling with the adrenaline. They were right about one thing: I would regret nothing. But they were about to learn a very important lesson. I did not come here to survive. I came to destroy. The first truck's door creaked open. A silhouette stepped out, tall and broad, holding something glinting in the fading light. I couldn't make out the weapon yet, but the intent was clear. They were prepared to force my hand. And then I remembered something, a detail from my reconnaissance, something they hadn't considered. The land was mine now. Every barn, every hollow tree, every dilapidated fence was under my control. And I had spent weeks studying this place, planning for this exact moment. I took a slow step back, letting my flashlight sweep across the ground. "You want a war?" I asked softly, almost whispering. "You'll have one. But remember this, revenge doesn't knock politely. It waits. And when it strikes, it's never forgiving." The man raised his weapon, the others moving closer, and in that moment, I realized the first move had been made. The game was no longer about intimidation. It was about survival, strategy, and the beginning of a reckoning that would leave nothing untouched. A single question burned in my mind as I watched the shadows converge. How far were they willing to go before they discovered the truth about me? Because I had a plan, and they had no idea just how patient and precise I could be. The quiet of the ranch had ended, replaced by the growl of engines and the whisper of vengeance waiting to be unleashed. Tonight, someone would bleed. And when it happened, the Harper Ranch would witness the start of a reckoning that no one would forget. The night pressed down on the Harper Ranch like a suffocating blanket. Shadows pooled in every corner, and the 4 trucks at the gate were black rectangles, immovable and ominous. I could hear the faint whistle of the wind through the broken fence posts, but beneath it all, there was a low, constant hum, the hum of menace. Every instinct in my body screamed that I should run, yet every plan I had ever made pointed me here. Standing my ground wasn't just a choice, it was the only way forward. The tallest man, my old enemy, the one whose betrayal had cost me everything, stepped closer. His weapon glinted faintly under the moonlight, the metal cold and deliberate. Behind him, the others mirrored his movements, closing the circle, forming a trap I had anticipated yet still felt the weight of. I took a slow step to the side, keeping my flashlight sweeping across the gravel. "You know," I said, voice calm, deliberate, "I didn't come here for a fight tonight. But if you insist." My words trailed, but the implication was clear. I was ready. They didn't flinch. Confidence radiated from them, but there was a hesitation I could exploit. I had studied these people long before setting foot on this land. I knew how they moved, how they thought, the arrogance that made them predictable. Suddenly, a low whistle cut through the air, a signal. From the darkness, the man with a weapon aimed at me, ready to act. But I had prepared for this. With a quick motion, I pressed a button in my pocket. From the shadows of the barns, a series of time flares ignited, casting the ranch in sudden, blinding light. The effect was immediate. The first man yelped, shielding his eyes. Another tripped over a hidden trough I had uncovered days before. Chaos spread in mere seconds, and in that moment of confusion, I struck. I ran toward the nearest truck, using its bulk as cover, my mind calculating every step, every heartbeat. They recovered faster than I expected, but the opening was enough. I could hear the furious shouts as they tried to regroup, guns swinging, flashlights cutting narrow beams across the ground. I ducked behind the truck, my breath ragged but controlled. This wasn't a fight of strength. This was a fight of wits, and I had prepared for it meticulously. One of them, a younger man with a scar running across his cheek, rushed toward me. Predictable. I sidestepped, pulling a steel chain from my truck bed. It was simple, heavy, and effective. The moment he lunged, I swung the chain, connecting with a sharp crack against his shoulder. He stumbled back, cursing, and I seized the opportunity to sprint toward the main barn. Inside, the darkness was almost complete, but I knew every corner, every beam, every hollowed post. I moved silently, a shadow among shadows, setting the stage for the next phase of my plan. The sound of footsteps and grunts followed me. My pursuers were relentless, but not clever enough to anticipate my advantage. I reached the old hayloft, climbing the creaking ladder as they banged on the barn doors below. My flashlight flickered across the rafters, revealing a stash of tools I had hidden days before: ropes, hooks, and a few traps designed for moments like this. I set to work quickly, rigging the barn doors so that a simple pull would send them swinging open, tripping anyone who tried to follow me too closely. From below, the voices shouted, angry and confused, "He's in there. Don't let him escape." My lips curled into a cold smile. Let them chase me. They didn't realize the entire property was my chessboard, and every step they took would play right into my hands. I dropped silently through a side exit I had reinforced, landing in the brush behind the barn. The cool night air hit my face, a reminder that this was my territory now. I could hear them scouring the main house, shouting, their flashlights carving lines through the darkness. But I was already moving, already calculating the next strike. The ranch, abandoned for years, was my ally. Loose boards, hidden pits, and shallow ditches, all overlooked by them, all planned by me, would slow their pursuit. I led them into a narrow path between the barns, where one misstep would trigger a hidden snare I had installed. I paused behind a broken fence, watching the first man trip and fall, cursing loudly as the trap closed around his ankle. A cold satisfaction spread through me. 1 down, 3 to go. I didn't wait for them to recover. I moved to the old windmill, climbing its skeletal frame, until I had a vantage point over the property. From here, I could see everything: the trucks at the gate, the others scattering, searching, furious but blind. And I could see the fire in their eyes, the same fire that had once destroyed me, now returning to burn them. It was time to remind them who they were dealing with. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small flare gun. Not lethal, but effective. I fired it toward the largest truck, hitting the gas tank cover with a bright explosion of sparks. The resulting panic sent the men diving for cover, shouting at each other, their coordination shattered. From my elevated position, I could descend onto the nearest truck. I landed silently on the hood, rattling it just enough to make them jump. One tried to shoot at me, but his aim was off, blinded by the flashes of light and the smoke from the flare. I leaped from the truck, landing behind the second man, and using the chain again to knock him off balance. He went down hard, sprawling in the dirt as curses filled the air. Adrenaline surged through me, sharp and exhilarating. This was only the beginning, but the taste of revenge was intoxicating. I could feel the momentum shifting. I wasn't just surviving, I was controlling the battlefield. And every misstep they made would bring them closer to the reckoning they had long denied me. The third man hesitated, realizing too late that the ranch itself had become my weapon. Loose boards, swinging chains, hidden tripwires, everything I had prepared months ago now worked against them. I watched as he stumbled into a ditch I had dug near the stables, arms flailing as he tried to catch himself. Another victory, another message: underestimate me at your own peril. From the windmill, I could see the last man, my primary adversary, standing near the gate, realizing that the simple intimidation they had planned was crumbling. His face, barely visible under the dim moonlight, twisted in rage. He had expected an easy scare, a quick return to his life of control. But I had turned the tables. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. Revenge was not about confrontation. It was about patience, planning, and the perfect strike. I had learned it the hard way. Tonight, the Harper Ranch was no longer a ruin. It was a stage, and I was finally stepping into the role I had waited years to play. The question burned in my mind as I descended from the windmill, the shadows of my enemies scattered and reeling. How far would they go to survive, and would they ever learn that the true danger had been here long before they arrived? One thing was certain, the night was far from over, and when the last man fell, he would understand the full measure of the reckoning he had brought upon himself. The ranch had grown alive in darkness, every creaking beam, every rustling tree, every whisper of the wind conspiring with me. I moved silently across the fields, surveying the aftermath of the chaos I had orchestrated. The trucks at the gate were scattered, some doors hanging open, tires spinning in shallow ditches. The men who had dared to intimidate me were broken, shaken, and scattered across my property, their arrogance shattered. Yet, the true fight was just beginning. Revenge, I reminded myself, was never about a single strike. It was about dismantling the life that had wronged you piece by piece, ensuring they felt the weight of every moment they had caused your suffering. And tonight was the first act. I crouched behind a toppled fence post, eyes scanning the shadows. Two of the men were still moving, their groans of pain and muttered curses audible even over the night wind. But my gaze fell on the last man, the one whose betrayal had started it all. He hadn't moved. He stood near the edge of the field, silent, watching me. His face, illuminated by the faint glow of the moon, was pale but not with fear. No, it was anger, the cold, measured kind that spoke of a man used to control, used to power. I had expected rage, but what I didn't expect was a calm calculation in his eyes. This wasn't someone ready to panic. This was someone plotting, someone who still believed he had leverage. That belief, that hubris, was exactly what I intended to exploit. "You've turned the ranch into a death trap," he said finally, voice low, almost admiring. "Impressive, but you forget something. Revenge isn't enough. You can't erase the past, no matter how clever you think you are." I smiled, a thin, dangerous curl of my lips. "Erase the past? No, I don't intend to erase it. I intend to make it unbearable for you. Every memory, every step you've taken that hurt me, it all comes back tonight. Do you feel it yet?" He didn't answer, but his fingers twitched near the handle of a knife he had drawn, a reflexive motion that revealed more than words ever could. He was prepared for a close confrontation, but I had no intention of letting it come to that. Not yet. My revenge was precise, surgical. It was about making him feel powerless before he even had a chance to strike. I moved toward the old Harper barn, shadows stretching and bending as I passed through them. I had set traps, yes, but I also had the psychological advantage. He didn't know the land like I did, didn't understand how every hidden corner, every broken post, every hollow tree could work for me. And the longer he hesitated, the more he fed into my control. I allowed a brief moment to savor the scene before moving on. Revenge was not just about punishment. It was about the inevitability of consequence. Every misstep, every act of arrogance, every past injustice had led them to this moment. And tonight, they would feel it all. The final man, the architect of my downfall, had taken cover behind one of the trucks, scanning the property with eyes narrowed, calculating his next move. He thought he could regroup, organize some semblance of a counterattack. But he underestimated how thoroughly I had studied the Harper Ranch, how every corner, every shadow, every abandoned structure was now my advantage. I approached him quietly, staying low, careful to remain in darkness. I knew that direct confrontation would only provoke a desperate reaction. Instead, I would manipulate, control, and dismantle him psychologically before delivering the final blow. "You remember this place," I said softly, letting my voice cut across a yard like a blade. "You remember what it meant to ruin me, to take everything. You built your life on my suffering. But tonight," I paused, letting the words hang, heavy and deliberate. "Tonight, the scales are balanced, and the Harper Ranch remembers everything." His eyes flicked toward me, narrowing. "You think this little game of traps and tricks, changes anything?" You think it's enough to undo what I've done." His voice was steady, but I could see the strain, the tension beneath the surface. I stepped into the dim moonlight, allowing him a glimpse of my presence, just enough to show control without revealing everything. "Undo?" I whispered. "No, I don't undo. I punish. I make you see every betrayal, every act of cruelty, every moment you thought you were untouchable. That is what tonight is about." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes, a hesitation that had been absent for years. He had always believed in his control, his ability to manipulate, to dominate. But now, he was confronting the undeniable truth. He was powerless in my domain. The Harper Ranch had become a reflection of his failures, and I was the instrument of his reckoning. I allowed him a moment to absorb it before moving the next piece of my plan into motion. A hidden cable, stretched across the path leading from the trucks to the main house, caught his attention too late. As he tried to advance, he tripped, sprawling to the ground, scraping his hands and knees. Pain and frustration etched across his face. I didn't approach immediately. I wanted him to feel every inch of helplessness, every moment of vulnerability. "This is what it's like," I murmured, circling him slowly, letting him see the inevitability of his fate. "To be at my mercy, to realize that every move you thought was clever has only led you here, and there's no one to save you. No friends, no allies, no excuses. Just the reckoning you built for yourself." His breathing quickened, eyes darting, searching for any escape. But every path was accounted for. Every corner, every shadow, every pitfall. I had anticipated it all. And now, I stepped closer, the weight of my presence pressing down like a storm about to break. The night was mine. The Harper Ranch had witnessed the first stage of the reckoning, and I could feel the tension tightening, ready to snap. I had proven control, orchestrated chaos, and shattered their confidence. But the final act, the confrontation that would leave no question of dominance, was still to come. And as he looked up at me, cornered and defeated, I asked a question that would haunt him long after tonight. How does it feel to realize that the life you built on the suffering of others can crumble in a single night? Because the Harper Ranch remembered, and it never forgave. The night was breathing, slow, heavy, alive. Wind rolled across Harper Ranch like a whispering judge, carrying dust, broken leaves, and the ghost of everything I had lost. The field was silent now. Too silent. The kind of silence that only comes when violence has already happened, and the echoes are still hanging in the air, waiting for their last word. He stood in front of me, the architect of my ruin, the man who'd stolen my livelihood, broken my name, turned my family's legacy into ash, and laughed while doing it. He was on his knees now. His once polished confidence was shattered. Mud streaked his jacket, blood clouded one eye. The trucks behind him sat crooked and silent, their fierce arrival reduced to twisted metal and flat tires. His men were gone, trapped, fled, broken, or defeated. The ranch had done its job, and now it was time for mine. He looked up slowly. "You won," he rasped. "So do it. Finish it." I studied him, not with rage, not with hatred, but with calm. He expected violence. Men like him always do. They expect revenge to be loud, bloody, messy. They think it looks like screaming and weapons raised. But real revenge is quiet. "No," I said. He blinked, confused. "No, I didn't come here to kill you." That frightened him more than any weapon ever could. I stepped around him, boots crunching against the gravel, circling slowly the way a storm circles before it breaks. "You don't die tonight," I said. "You live." He scoffed weakly. "That's mercy." I shook my head. "It's punishment." I pulled a folder from my coat. Thick, heavy, real. Inside were years of quiet work. Paper trails, shell companies, false contracts I baited him into signing, recordings of backroom deals, proof of fraud, land seizures, illegal foreclosures. Every move he'd made against me, I mirrored it, documented it, trapped it. "I didn't buy this ranch because it was cheap," I said, tossing the folder at his feet. Papers scattered across the dirt. "I bought it because of what runs under it." He stared down at the pages, and his face went gray. You don't have the power to use this, he whispered. Behind him, headlights flicked on. I didn't turn. 4 black SUVs rolled up silently, perfectly in line. Doors opened. Shapes stepped out, calm, controlled, professional. Not friends. Not enemies. Auditors. Federal investigators. The ones I called weeks ago. Because my revenge wasn't about a gun. It was about timing. You should have killed me, he breathed. I knelt down in front of him so we were eye level. You should have never touched my life. The agents moved in. Cuffs snapped. Rights were read. His world collapsed not with an explosion, but with paperwork and silence, the same way mine had. As they walked him past the trucks, past a broken gate, past a boundary he'd arrogantly crossed, he looked back at me, and for the first time, he looked small. The SUVs disappeared down the dark road, carrying him toward a future he couldn't control. I stood alone at the gate. The wind slowed. The dust settled. The ranch exhaled. For the first time since I'd arrived, Hopper Ranch felt quiet in the right way. Not empty. Peaceful. I walked back toward the house, stepping through broken boards and peeling paint. Every creak of the floor felt different now. No longer ominous. No longer abandoned. Mine. I sat on the old front steps as dawn began to stretch faint color across the horizon. Orange. Pink. Gold. Revenge, I realized, isn't loud. It's not wild. It's not chaos. It's control. It's patience. It's letting the people who broke you live long enough to understand exactly what they lost. Behind me, the windmill turned for the first time I'd ever seen. A slow, tired creak, but it moved. Just like me. Just like this land. Just like everything they tried to kill. And before the sun fully rose, before the night completely died, I asked myself one last question. Not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of clarity. Was it worth it? The answer came not as a voice, but as peace. And that was the only ending strong enough to hold the weight of everything that had come before.